Hey guys, and welcome to our first episode of In the Genius Zone. And I'm so excited to have our very first guest with us today. So, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi there, my name is Michal Levison. I am the founder of Season Moments, and I'm really happy to be here today.
Awesome. So, the first question of every episode is tell us about your genius zone.
The Genius Zone. So, for me, I have always been able to see through walls and break down barriers. And the way that I'm doing it now is through food, which is our universal language. So, although we don't always have everything in common, we all have to eat, and we can all use food as a gateway to human connection.
Oh, I love that so much. So, what does that look like for you? Most healers have gotten really specific on their journey because of something that occurred for them in their personal life. Is that the case for you?
Yes. Well, food has shaped me from the beginning of my life. I have so many memories of food, being in the kitchen, eating, cooking, sharing stories. And food was always central to the way that I was raised. I don't know if it's because I'm Israeli or the fact that my parents and grandparents just were all obsessed with food, but throughout my entire continuum, food has always played a central role. I love to cook dinner for my friends in high school and college, and when I got married, food became really the essence of our relationship, and we love to cook together. We love to cook for each other, go out to restaurants, talk about food. And so, of course, as soon as I was pregnant and we found out that we were having our first child, we talked about what the most important thing would be for us. And we both agreed that developing a palate and creating a child that enjoyed and loved food and could sit with us at a restaurant was tantamount. So, whereas other parents were focusing on other developmental things and how many times their kids peed and pooped and how quickly their kids could walk, for us the most important thing was how quickly can we take this kid to a restaurant, which ironically was the first time that she set foot outside of the hospital, was the first time she went to a restaurant. So
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, that's like perfect first memory for your family situation. What I
absolutely.
love about your goal and your story is so many relationships like go dull. They talk about the 7-year itch, or like food can be like a neither person can choose what they want. And so I am such a foodie. I love all kinds of food and try to stay healthy, but food is meant to be enjoyed and life is meant to be enjoyed. And so I love that you have incorporated that not only into your own romantic relationship, which I'm sure just like it just opens up so many doors. Like instead of being bored, it's like, hey, let's learn how to cook something new, or let
Yep.
me surprise you. And you had mentioned when we spoke yesterday that you have certain memories from your childhood where, like, going to your family's house or extended family's house for meals, and there were like certain foods that you could just expect. Is that
Absolutely.
accurate?
Absolutely. With my grandmother, my mom's mom, every single time we walked into her apartment, first of all, like the amazing aroma of chicken soup was like it would give you this hug. She would hug you, and then her chicken soup would give you a
Oh, I love
secondary hug.
that.
And that was always, it was like chicken soup with noodles. And that was like every single time we set foot in her house. And then, of course, then she would empty out the refrigerator and like force feed us with everything. So fruit and everything else. But chicken soup was always like the first thing you had at my grandmother's house. I also have, I think my first real food memory is when I was 3 years old, is in her kitchen, making strawberry preserves. And I just remember this giant stock pot that she would, she went to the market and bought bajillion strawberries, and we would sit for hours, and she would stir slowly the strawberries and the sugar, and we would just sit in the kitchen chatting. And I think those kinds of memories are so important. One, they bind you and they bond you to your family members. but that's also kind of the basis for the work that I do, because I find that food is really an incredible trigger. It can be positive and negative, obviously, but it's a trigger for memory. It's a trigger for connection, because if we remember, it's like, oh, this jam makes me think of that time I was in the kitchen with my grandmother when I was 3 years old. That's a conversation starter. And
Absolutely.
so when you're sitting at a table with other people, there are so many opportunities that food brings up, to connect over things that you might never ever really be able to gain, stories
Right.
that
You
you might
don't just
never
walk up
uncover.
to someone and say, "Yeah, my grandma makes this amazing jello," you know, but if you
Exactly.
have jello,
Imagine someone would look at you like, what?
yeah,
Where'd that come from?
okay. Um, I wanted to ask you since like another thing I love about this is so many kids are picky eaters,
Yeah.
and I experienced this as a single mom. Um, my son at like a young age when he first started getting into foods, he was so good. He would eat like raw peppers with hummus and like nothing was an issue. And then I don't want to point fingers, but went to stay with grandma and grandpa for the summer and got exposed to all the fun things. And since then, the battle with vegetables has been like just a downhill thing. Like
Mhm.
he has two or three things he'll eat
Right.
really well. And then all of a sudden he won't want that. And maybe one thing comes in, but he's usually around like a three vegetable that I get him a lot of the like apple sauces that have fruits and vegetables. So
Right.
I sneak it into him that way. But
Right.
like it's so important for kids to learn to like vegetables. Like you
Right.
just can't get around it. And they're good. I mean, maybe
They
not when
are.
you're a kid, but
They
I
can be
want to
really
know.
yummy.
Yeah, I want to know if you have any secrets to share with us or anything you
Yes.
did with your kids around like opening up their palate.
So it's important to always give them, they have to try stuff. So, yes, they don't have to love everything. That a big thing for me, with especially with my girls, is they have to try it, they don't have to love it. They don't even have to like it, but they have to try it. And you can start in your home, where if the kid is really like, this is so disgusting, I can't even swallow it, you can have them spit it out. So you're not out in a restaurant and they're spitting food, but you can have little tastings. But I actually take it even, I take it back a little bit. So I'm a big believer, especially with young kids, that they need to understand where food comes from. So if you take them to a farm, if you plant your own vegetable garden, or
Yes.
if you go to the grocery store or a farmer's market and they see the produce, and
So
then I
you're
play
building
a
a
game.
relationship with the food.
Exactly. I think part of what we have as our biggest issue nowadays in our country is that we've gone so far away from where food comes from, so far away from how we should relate to food. We use food as fuel, or as just to like stop the hunger pangs, as opposed to something that's
Like a
nourishing.
habit, an unconscious
Yes,
autopilot, like I just have to put stuff in my face and I'm not going to pay
exactly.
any attention to what it is or how much or how often or what
Exactly.
the emotions are. I
Yeah,
wanted to ask you if you do emotion work with food. Like so many people
absolutely.
like guilt eat or binge or
Right.
avoid food when they're not feeling 100%.
Yep.
What's been your experience there?
When I'm depressed or sad, or not feeling, right with myself, I avoid food, which it's terrible. It's not a healthy relationship. I kind of forget to eat, or whatever the excuse is, but I can, now that I know that that is how, that is my habit. I am very cognizant when that starts to happen, and I really become much more mindful. I really think about, what am I putting in my body? So the mindfulness part is really important, because when this is the work that I'm doing with corporate culture, is really trying to get people to step away from their desks at mealtime and go sit at a table. Because when we sit and we just mindlessly shovel food into our our mouths
While
while
looking at
we're
a
on
screen.
social media or doing work. We're not cognizant of what we're eating. We can either overeat or undereat. We can eat too fast. And so sitting down at a table with another human slows you down. One, because literally there's like this human response to sitting across the table from another person that makes you eat slower because you don't want to seem like you're just shoving your food in your face.
Just like a
So
shovel.
yeah, and you're not shoveling. You literally are slowing down. Plus, if you're having a conversation, obviously that slows you down. So you actually eat slower, which is much more beneficial because you're not your body response to the food is actually much more natural. So if you have eaten enough to the point of saturation and that you're sated, your body has the opportunity to tell you, because you're taking these breaks. You're not just eat until whatever it is that you have in front of you is done. It's actually your body's natural response saying, okay, I'm full, I don't need any more. But continue to have this nice conversation with this person because it's interesting.
Right. As if like a visualization for that could be if you're filling up a water balloon and you just turn it on full blast and it's like it's gonna pop or pop off the faucet or
Yep.
before you even have a chance to do anything about it. Whereas if you go slow, you can stop at like the perfect time.
That's exactly right.
Awesome. How do you feel about kids and their emotions behind their eating habits?
So I think that's that. Luckily, I have gotten to really understand a lot more about the psychology of food. I've done about a decade's worth of work on the science and the data behind it, but I've also worked directly with thousands of families.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest problem that I see is that kids just don't have a relationship to food. So we're so busy, right? Like the busyness epidemic is has taken over family life. So everyone is busy. We're running around, we're running ragged. I mean, the saddest thing is that 40% of all American meals are eaten in the car.
Oh my
We're
God,
Yeah, it's a terrifying statistic, isn't it?
that's crazy.
It's awful. It's terrible. But yeah, I mean, kids are constantly shuffling around. They're in school for long hours. They're not getting nutritious, healthful meals while they're at school. Um,
Especially once they have a choice and can hit the vending machines.
exactly. It's very rare that a child is eating well while at school. The American school system has no interest in creating a meal time for kids. And it's really a shame, because if you look at culture, like in France, lunchtime is an integral part of their school day. They
Oh
sit
my gosh,
down.
that's amazing.
Yeah, they sit down. There are tablecloths on the table. They have real silverware, real cutlery, real plates, real food that's prepared. Um, each school sends out a month-long calendar so that you know exactly what your kid is eating, so that you're not preparing. They're not having chicken with mushrooms with string beans and a slice of melon for lunch, and then you're repeating it at dinner. So it's
Oh
very
my
much a part of,
gosh.
yes,
The relationship of the food, like obviously French are known for being culinary people, but
yes,
the fact that they have brought that into the school system and it's bridging the relationship, like especially here in America, families are so disconnected from the school. Even if
yes,
you're on PTA, you're being super involved. It takes a lot of effort to build that relationship, and most people are
absolutely.
too busy. And so I love that the school system is using that as a way to bridge the gap between like the goal really seems like a wholeness,
It is.
well-roundedness for the child,
It
and the
is.
adults are all like stepping up and taking part. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
And they do a really great job of, so if you've done, not you, but there have been studies that have shown that you need to taste a food 14 times before you can determine whether you like it or not.
Oh my gosh.
So for them, like they will introduce new foods, like especially in the younger ages, they'll introduce new foods. But the way to introduce new food is not just to present beets like the same way every time you're presenting the beets. So one time it'll be in soup, one time it'll be in a salad, one time it'll be as a side dish, one time it'll be roasted, one time it'll be grilled. And then the kids have
Amazing.
all these opportunities to taste this new food or a different food and interact with it differently. And what I love about the French way of lunching, which is really what my business is doing now with companies, is that sitting down at a table, sitting down, having a real meal allows you to do so much more than just enjoy the enjoying of the food is super important because the food nourishes us, you know, our bodies, our minds, our spirit. But sitting at a table and having a conversation also allows you to slow down and de-stress and share those stories and say like, oh, this tastes like my grandma's preserves, or oh my goodness, I remember when my dad used to make me pizza and it tasted just like this. And then you have these ways of connecting that you can then layer, and then these are much deeper connection points, and they create a much deeper sense of trust than just, you know, interaction in the classroom or interaction in the office.
Mhm. Amazing. So tell us more about how your business has evolved. I believe you told me that you started out in corporate yourself. Is that right?
That's
So
true.
how did that journey go?
So I did start out in the corporate world and I burnt out. It was I got to a point where literally I'd lost. So again, we go back to the fact that I stopped eating. So I was burnt out. I was stressed beyond measure. And I lost about 20 pounds that I really didn't have to lose. So I was walking around like the bones in my neck were sticking out and I was not healthy.
Mhm.
And that experience, and you know, I went to the doctor thinking maybe there was a thyroid issue or something medically wrong with me, but really what it turned out was that the burnout was and the stress had impacted my body and my mind so deeply that I just was unhealthy because of it. And so I went on a wholesale shift and I really became much more that was the like the deepest time when I really stopped eating due to stress and burnout. So for me, it became a really conscious effort to not just eat healthfully, but to have a much more mindful approach to eating. And from there, you know, I went on. I started a totally separate, unrelated business. I was designing jewelry and accessories, and that was great. And that was kind of like my break. I took a break from all of this crazy stress. I did something that was really for myself.
And
And then,
creative and fun.
yes, I loved it. And then, you know, eventually when I had my first daughter, I recognized that food, you know, I recognized that food was central to how I wanted to raise her. And what I realized was that so many other people needed it too. So I started a blog, which quickly, it started as a parenting blog, but then quickly evolved into how to build your family through food. And that's how I spent about 10 years working with families, you know, surrounding the issue of picky eating, how to feed your family, how to do it, you know, when you're working and, you know, super busy, how to connect to each other in the kitchen, outside, you know, farming, growing vegetables, food shopping, and how to create a family meal that really is that central point of connection. And then all of a sudden, a couple of years ago, I was speaking with a few friends who were working with HR folks, and they were talking to me about all the team building um, exercises and all of the team building opportunities that the HR folks were looking for. And it kind of clicked in my mind. I'm like, "Ah, what I'm doing with families really translates to the corporate world, because team building opportunities and team building activities are a $1 billion a year industry. However, they're mostly done after hours or offsite, and there's a lot of money spent and a lot of time spent with a very low return on the investment. What I realized is lunch is this perfect built-in opportunity that doesn't cost a lot of money. It's a matter of shifting the corporate culture and saying, listen, we want you to step away from your desk, step away from your work, shift away from the desk and go sit at a table, eat with another human, and take that very necessary break that will enable you to be so much more productive, so much more creative, innovative, and more connected than if you just barreled through lunch. So that's the work that I'm doing now. It's really shifting culture and really recognizing that pause, that break, that breath that you can take at noon, and it doesn't require a 3-hour lunch. This can be a half an hour, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but it requires you to get up, shift your position, sit with another human, and take a true break from the work.
What I love about your approach is that, yes, it's obviously centered around food, but so many, if you imagine like the food pyramid, we have all these different components of our life that are important, like
Yes.
connection, our relationships, going outside in nature. Like when you said it doesn't have to be a 3-hour thing, it can be 20 minutes. The first thing that comes into my brain is like all the doctors and the all sides of health and science say, even if it's just 20 minutes, like take a walk outside. It's here in Utah, it's freezing right now, so it's not as easy, it's not as fun, but you know, it's still not hard to go spend 20 minutes outside and get
Correct.
fresh air and get some sunshine. And so I love this because like that's the best time to go outside and have lunch anyways, is when it's nice weather. You can go sit outside, kind of separate yourself, unplug from that business brain, and really just have a chance to fill up your tank. Like you're saying
Yes.
about being burned out. Like if we only have 10 energy spoons a day and being at work takes like 8, we have to do little things to fill up that tank. Otherwise, by the time we get home, all we're gonna do is binge Netflix, ignore our kids, like order fast food. Like that's when all of the habits start to go downhill. Is when the self care
Absolutely.
tank is empty. So I love this because you're filling the self care tank like 10 ways over, like in one activity that's 20 minutes long. It's amazing.
Yes. And
Yay!
it's simple. It's not, something that's crazy. It's not asking you to do something above and beyond anything else, but it's being mindful. It's remembering that lunch break because it's there. It's so easy to take it. It's like grab
Mhm.
it with your hands and take that 20 minutes. And if you can do a
Like,
little
look
longer,
forward
great.
to it. Don't try and push it off. Don't try and replace it with your to-do list. Like, look forward to that recharge moment.
Because I'll be very honest with you, most
Mhm.
people think that barreling through the day and saying like, okay, I'm going to go straight through lunch because then I'll be so much more productive and I'll get everything done faster. The irony is that doesn't happen because
Right.
our brains cannot function for more than 3 to 4 hours at a time. Like we really need to take mini breaks in between those 3 to 4 hours. But like for a long stretch, 3 to 4 hours is kind of the max capacity, and then our brain needs a break. And
Yep.
so,
Amazing statistics.
yeah. So if you go through, like, if you're going to say, here's my morning, I'm going to work 8 to 12, I'm going to do like super productive. What you really should do is 8 to 8:55, then take a 5-minute break. 9:55, 5-minute break. Those 4 hours will be so much more productive. And then if you break for lunch, you will literally open up this little like air bubble in your brain so that when you get back, all of a sudden everything looks different. It's that tiny little 1-degree shift. Because if you stare at a problem, if you have a problem, you're like, okay, I've been staring at this for 3 hours. Do you think staring at it for 3 hours more is really going to solve it? I
No,
don't think so.
no.
I know the answer is no. But if you go stand up, you take a walk, you go sit down at a table with Susie and you say, "Hey, Susie, what are you eating?" And you talk about literally nothing that has anything to do with your work, right? It's completely irrelevant. But it will have literally given your brain like that nice massage. It's almost like your brain got to take a little break from the intensity. And then you get back and you're like, oh, boom, I got it. That's
Love.
that's the power of the break. That's the power of lunch.
Mhm.
And food for me, the reason lunch is so important is because it's not just the break, but it's that connecting to another person that is so important.
Yes, I love that. So tell us a little bit, and you don't have to give away all your secret sauce, but when you go in to transform a business, a corporate situation with mealtime and these amazing hacks that you have, what does that look like?
So there are different ways that I work with companies. Sometimes I'm just brought in as a speaker just to talk about the importance of lunch, how lunch can make a difference, and a lot of the points that we've shared today.
Mhm.
Other times I'm brought in to really do a wholesale shift of the culture. So that is, it's a deep dive and it's an analyzing the relationships between people, really doing a taking the temperature of what's the engagement like,
Mhm.
what's the retention like, what is the HR cycle, because right now, um, right before the pandemic, the HR cycle was 24/7 because millennials especially were staying at a job for 8 months and then jumping ship, and most of that was because they weren't engaged. They had no connection to their colleagues or to the company or to the mission of the company, and so it was really easy. It was like, I don't need to be here any longer. I'm going to go to the next place.
Mhm.
So for me, it's not just like, let's get everyone around a lunch table, but it's really figuring out what is the engagement like, at the company, and how do we create better engagement through lunch or through mealtime using food so that there's a deeper bond, because when people are bonded to each other and they have a mutual kind of goal,
Mhm.
then they're much more likely to stay at a company.
Mhm. I love that. And so you're using this thing that fills the self-care tank a million ways over while addressing one of the biggest problems, not only in the corporate world, but also in like bigger businesses is
Yeah,
turnover rate. Turnover rate is insane.
it's crazy.
So I love that. You're really like going into the core of the business and strengthening the foundation. That's
Absolutely.
just amazing. So tell us, what's the best way for someone to, like, we know you work in the corporate world and you still do one-on-one work with families. Is
I
that
do.
accurate? Awesome.
So my website is much more centered right now to the corporate world, but if you have a need and want to do some one-on-one coaching for your family, I am absolutely available. My contact info is on the website. You go right there to seasonedmoments.com. You can book some time with me and bring me in as a speaker. I also speak to communities and to conferences. So I do a lot of keynote speaking. I am happy. I just want to get the message out there that we can be much healthier, happier, and more productive humans in general if
Mhm.
we just get back to the roots, of food.
I love that because the roots literally are the roots. The food
Yeah.
is the root. Okay, so you actually just said something that reminded me of an amazing piece of your story that we haven't even shared. Is you've actually done this with like towns and cities. Yeah,
Yeah.
tell us about that.
So, the way of the world, we live together in communities, but we don't always share the same opinions, right? So, you know, someone might be red and someone might be blue, someone might be liberal, someone might be more conservative, someone is from one, faith and someone's from another,
Mhm.
and every town has a big mix of people. And I've been approached by several towns and have come up with some interesting solutions to how do we bring our community together? Because we especially in the past year, 2 years, 3 years, the division that has grown in our country has become much more palpable.
Oh
And
yeah.
so I've been brought in to really create. I've created events. I've created, ways for people to connect, and using really food as that central element, because it's our universal language. We all eat, we all have to eat. And if we look at what makes us similar as opposed to what differentiates us, we can really reach across the aisles. So if we look at different cultures, they all have dumplings, right? Some sort of dough wrapped around a filling. And so I've done an event where we literally brought dumplings from, I think, like 25 different cultures. And
Oh
so
my
then it
gosh.
opens the conversations like, oh my God, the pierogi, it's not that different from dim sum and, and empanada and all these different things. And you realize that, yes, we're different. And that different is great because we all have different attributes, and that means that we have different things to contribute to the world. But
Mhm.
then deep down, we also have so much in common. And if we can tease out the commonalities and highlight those, then we can bridge the gap. Then we can heal the divide and become more tolerant and more loving and more empathetic, and
We're
more of a
connected.
community and connected.
That's amazing. So when you're working on that scale, it's like mostly events that you're
It is.
hosting and
It
coordinating?
is. It is. It's large scale events. And it's also creating, panels and creating opportunities for people to share their knowledge and share their wisdom across a wide swath of industries and cultures um and you know communities too.
Yeah, and who doesn't love a good recipe swap? I'm always looking to steal my neighbor's recipes and like,
Well,
you know,
that's a great way to get to know someone in town, right? It's like,
absolutely.
if you don't know people, you can, post a recipe swap or a cookie swap. And, if you want to go knock on your neighbor's door, say like, hey, I live next door. I would love to get to know you and your culture. It's such an incredible entree into getting to know someone.
I am so happy that we met. Can I share where we met?
Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
So we met just this week in the Be on TV boot camp. And there's just so many amazing people in there, but I am so obsessed with you and everything that you're doing. I mean, I know so many people who are nutritionists. I mean, I am one, like, but I have never seen anyone doing what you're doing in the food industry. And one thing, like, I mean, everything about this is you're just like absolutely in your genius zone. But one thing that I love about your genius zone, that's a little bit kind of like the shadow side of the moon, like food is your genius zone, relationships, connecting people is your genius zone. But you're amazing at like being able to take your genius zone and not live in a box with it. Like you've done it with families, you've done it with kids, you've done it in the corporate world, you've done it with towns and like communities, like it's just like a big flower like blooming open, and I love it so much, and thank you so much for sharing. And we will link, if you're watching this on YouTube, down in the comments in the description, we will link to your website so
Wonderful.
that everyone can book with you in any capacity that is right for them, because seriously, like I just want you to come like live at my house. Like they're so much fun, and if I get organizing like big events, I'm definitely going to bring you in. So thank you
Awesome.
so much for sharing your genius zone with us. It's been so much fun to speak with you and to have you.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thank you, sweetie. And we will talk soon. Have a great day.
You too.